The night Tobias Okafor walked into the Harlow School of Music's winter audition, he had $40 in his pocket, a second-hand violin case held together with electrical tape, and absolutely no idea that someone had already decided he didn't belong there. He was 22. His mother, Cecile, cleaned offices on the 14th floor of a Bay Street tower in downtown Toronto. The kind of tower with a string quartet in the lobby at Christmas and a waiting list for parking spots that cost more per month than Cecile made in 2. Tobias had grown up listening to classical music through her phone speaker while she ironed her uniform for the next morning's shift. He'd started playing violin at 14 on an instrument, borrowed from a community center in Scarborough. By the time he was 19, every music teacher he'd met told him the same thing. His ear was extraordinary. His technique was self-taught and rough in places, but the sound he made, that was something else, something that didn't come from method books. The Harlow Winter Concert was the most prestigious youth performance event in the city. Not youth as in teenagers, youth as in under 30. It drew foundations, donors, arts journalists. A spot in the ensemble meant exposure. It meant connections. It meant the kind of doors that didn't open for people who lived in Scarborough and whose mothers cleaned offices on Bay Street. Tobias had applied 6 months earlier, submitted recordings, passed the written music theory component, and received a letter, an actual paper letter, inviting him to the final live audition. He'd read it 4 times standing at the mailbox in the cold before he went back inside. He told his mother that night while she was eating dinner before her evening shift. She put her fork down and looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You earned that." She said it like a fact. No exclamation point. No performance. Just certainty, the way she said everything she meant. Tobias arrived at the Harlow building 20 minutes early. It was a converted heritage building near Bloor and Avenue, all dark wood paneling and framed portraits of past directors. The lobby smelled like old carpet and rosin. Other auditionees stood in clusters, talking in the particular low-voiced way that people do when they're nervous, but don't want anyone to know. Tobias found a seat near the window, opened his case, and began the quiet ritual of tuning. He'd been there maybe 10 minutes when a woman appeared beside him. She didn't introduce herself. She was wearing a burgundy blazer with a small enamel pin on the lapel, a treble clef, gold, the kind that came with membership to something important. She looked at his violin case, then at him, then at the case again. "Are you here for the ensemble audition?" she asked. "Yes," Tobias said. "And you have your confirmation letter?" He did. He handed it to her. She looked at it with the particular expression of someone searching for a flaw in a document they expected to be flawless. She handed it back. "The advanced ensemble," she said, "has a specific technical prerequisite, conservatory-level training, typically. We find that applicants without formal instruction sometimes find the repertoire challenging." Tobias looked at her. "The letter says I qualified," he said. "Of course," she said. "I'm simply making sure you have the full picture." She walked away before he could answer. Her name, he would find out later, was Constance Vale. She was a founding board member of the Harlow Ensemble, a former concert violinist, and the mother of a 20-year-old named Philip, who had been playing violin since age 4, who had attended the Royal Conservatory, and who had placed in the ensemble the previous 3 years running. Tobias didn't know any of that yet. He tucked the letter back into his case and went back to tuning. The auditions were held in a large rehearsal room on the 2nd floor. One by one, names were called. Tobias waited. He listened to the muffled sounds of other auditionees through the door. Scales, fragments of the required piece, the occasional pause and restart. He wasn't nervous exactly. He was something closer to focused. He had learned to be focused in the way that people learn when they've had to build everything themselves, piece by piece, with no cushion underneath. His name was called last. He walked in. 3 people sat at a long table, 2 he didn't recognize, and Constance Vale in the center. There was a 4th chair at the table, empty. Someone had left a water glass. "Tobias Okafor," said the man to the left, glancing at his sheet. "Welcome. Whenever you're ready." Tobias positioned himself, settled his bow, and played. He played the required Bartók excerpt first. Clean, precise where it needed to be and in the passage near the end. The one that most players rushed through because of the fingering. He slowed down just slightly, just enough to let the phrase breathe the way Bartók had meant it to. Then he played the short free choice piece he'd prepared. It was a movement from a Ghanaian composer named Ni Norti that Tobias had found through a public library database 2 years earlier and had been working on ever since. It wasn't on any conservatory syllabus. It wasn't widely performed, but it was beautiful in a way that caught people off guard. Deceptively simple at first, then suddenly architectural, full of harmonics that required genuine ear to execute. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. The man to the left wrote something on his sheet. Constance Vale set down her pen. "Thank you," she said. Her voice gave nothing away. Tobias walked out. He heard nothing for 2 weeks. Then he received an email saying that the ensemble positions had been filled and thanking him for his participation. No ranking, no feedback. A single paragraph of administrative language that told him nothing. He read it in the parking lot of the grocery store where he worked part-time. He sat in his car for a while. Then he went inside and stocked shelves for 4 hours and didn't tell anyone. His mother found out because she noticed. She always noticed. 3 days after the email, she sat down across from him at the kitchen table and looked at him the way she looked when she already knew the answer but was giving him space to say it. "They said no," he told her. She nodded slowly. "Was there a reason given?" "No." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did you play well?" "Yes," he said, and he meant it, not with arrogance, just with the accuracy of someone who knows what they did. "Then they know what they passed on," she said, "even if they haven't admitted it to themselves yet." She got up and put the kettle on. That was Cecile, not a woman who cried about injustice or made speeches about it. She absorbed it, named it plainly, and then turned back to the work. Tobias didn't know what Constance Vale had done. He found out 3 months later, and only by accident. A woman named Judith Nosey taught private violin in the annex. She had sat on the Harlow audition panel years before and still had connections to people who talked. She heard Tobias play at a small community concert in February and tracked him down afterward. Over coffee, she told him that 2 people on the panel had ranked him first after the live audition, that the third, she didn't name her, but she didn't have to, had argued he lacked the formal background to represent the ensemble's standards, that she had raised procedural concerns about whether his application had met all prerequisites, that by the time the conversation was done, his file had been set aside. It wasn't a vote, Judith said carefully. It was a persuasion. Tobias held his coffee cup and said nothing for a moment. "Who got the spot?" he asked. Judith looked at him steadily. "A young man named Philip Vale. He went home. He didn't tell his mother that night. He sat with it for a few days, turned it over, examined it from different angles. He thought about his mother on the 14th floor of that Bay Street tower, cleaning glass desks and emptying recycling bins and being invisible to everyone who walked past her. And he thought about the letter with the gold letterhead that she had watched him, read 4 times in the cold, and something in him went very quiet and very clear. He began preparing for the Harlow Spring Showcase. It was a different event, not an ensemble audition, but an open-call solo performance evening. Anyone who had participated in a Harlow program in the last 18 months was eligible to apply. Technically, Tobias qualified. He'd completed a 6-week music theory workshop the previous summer, a Harlow community program. He applied the same week he sat with Judith. He didn't tell anyone. Not his mother, not Judith, not his co-workers. He practiced in the evenings after his shift, in the kitchen with the door closed, and on weekends in the rehearsal room of the community center in Scarborough that let him book them for free if he volunteered at their after-school program on Thursdays. He worked on 2 pieces, the Ni Norti movement he'd played in the audition, the one they had sat on and set aside, and something new, a piece he wrote himself, built around a melody his mother used to hum while she worked. He hadn't told her that either. He didn't know how. The spring showcase was held on a Friday evening in April. The room was different from the audition space. It was the Harlow's main performance hall, with proper seating and warm lighting, and an audience that included donors, board members, parents, and community guests. Tobias arrived early, signed in, and found a seat in the back to wait. He saw Constance Vale come in with her husband. She was wearing gray this time, and she moved through the room with the ease of someone who believed the room belonged to her, pausing to greet people, touching arms, laughing at the right moments. Philip was there too, standing near the front with a group of other young musicians. He looked relaxed. He had the look of someone who had never had to wonder whether they belonged somewhere. Tobias watched them for a moment. Then he looked away. The program ran in order. Tobias was near the end. He sat through 12 other performances, some excellent, some adequate, one genuinely stunning cellist from Brampton who made him lean forward in his seat. When his name was called, he walked to the front of the room, adjusted the microphone stand to the side so it wouldn't block him, and stood for a moment before he played. He played the Ni Nordi first. He played it the way he had the first time, in the audition room, but better, because 3 more months of work lived in his hands now, and because there was something freeing about playing in a room where the outcome had already been decided against him once. He had nothing to protect. He could just play. The room changed during the Ni Nordi. He felt it before he heard it. The particular quality of silence that settles when people stop thinking and start listening. Not polite listening. Actual listening. The kind where people forget to check their phones. He paused before the second piece. Just a few seconds. Then he began the piece he had written, the one built around his mother's melody. It started quietly, almost conversational, the way she hummed, a little absent-minded, moving through her morning routine. Then it opened up. It grew into something larger than itself, something that held the whole weight of everything she had carried quietly, and kept carrying without complaint. All the floors she had cleaned, and the shifts she had worked, and the way she had put down her fork and said, "You earned that," like a fact, like a thing that required no celebration because it was simply true. He didn't look at the audience while he played. He looked at the middle distance, the way he always did, where the music lived. When he finished, the silence lasted long enough that he wondered if he had miscalculated something. Then the applause came. It was not polite applause. It was the kind that starts in one place and then catches, the kind where people stand up without quite deciding to. The cellist from Brampton was on her feet. Judith Gozy, who had come without telling him, was in the 3rd row with her hand pressed over her mouth. In the 4th row from the back, a man Tobias didn't know leaned over to his companion and said something. The companion nodded. That man's name was Stuart Aldridge. He ran a foundation that funded emerging artists across Ontario. He had come tonight because someone on his board had mentioned the showcase offhand, and he had nothing else on his Friday. He had been halfway to board by the time Tobias's name was called. Tobias didn't know any of that yet. What he did know was that Constance Vale was in the 7th row, and she was not standing, and she was not clapping, and her face had the careful stillness of someone who has just understood something they can't undo. Beside her, Philip Vale was clapping. He was looking at Tobias with an expression that was complicated, something between recognition and what might have been, if you were generous, the beginning of honesty. He clapped steadily. Tobias caught his eye for a moment. He didn't feel triumph. He had expected to. And he didn't. What he felt was something quieter. Something close to the feeling of putting down a weight you've been carrying so long you stopped noticing it on your back. After the program ended, people came to find him. The Brampton cellist, whose name was Amara, said simply, "That second piece. Did you write that?" When he said yes, she just nodded, like that confirmed something. Judith found him near the door and hugged him without saying anything for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry I didn't do more." "Earlier, you told me the truth," he said. That was something. Stuart Aldridge found him 15 minutes later. He shook Tobias's hand and asked if he had a card. Tobias didn't have a card. Stuart gave him his own and said to email him. Tobias put the card in his violin case next to the confirmation letter he still kept there. He wasn't sure why he still kept the letter. Maybe because throwing it away would have meant it had the power to disappear, and he didn't want to give it that. He called his mother from the parking lot. "How was it?" she asked. She was on her break, he could tell. There was the particular ambient hum of the 14th floor break room behind her. I played, he said, and it was good. I think something might come from it. A pause. He heard her set something down. Was the piece ready? She asked. The one you've been working on. He hadn't told her about the second piece. He hadn't told her it was built from her melody. And yet, Cecile, she always noticed. How did you know about that one? He asked. Because you play differently when you think no one is listening, she said. I could hear you through the door. Some nights. He leaned against the car. The parking lot was half empty now, a few clusters of people still lingering. The April air was cold the way Toronto April is cold. Winter not quite convinced to leave yet. It was about you, he said. She didn't say anything for a moment. I know, she said. The foundation's email came 6 weeks later. A residency, a small performance stipend, and an invitation to perform at a major showcase the following winter, the kind of showcase that the Harlow concert fed into. The kind with the foundations and the donors and the arts journalists. Tobias was stocking shelves when the notification came through on his phone. He stopped in the middle of the cereal aisle and read it twice. Then he took a picture of his screen and sent it to his mother. Her reply came back in under a minute, which was unusual for her during shifts. It was 3 words. I told you. No exclamation point. No performance. Just the quiet certainty of a woman who had known, all along, how the story was going to have to end. Not because the world was fair, but because her son had decided, somewhere in himself, that he would not let unfairness be the last word. There are people in this world who hold the doors. They decide from behind their enamel pins and their empty chairs and their polite procedural concerns who gets to walk through and who gets sent back. Sometimes they win. Sometimes the person they turn away goes home and practices in the kitchen with the door closed, builds something they were never given, and walks back in through a different door entirely, the one the gatekeepers forgot they couldn't lock. Tobias Okafor did not become successful because the system opened up for him. He became successful because he understood at 22, standing in a parking lot in the cold with a second-hand violin case held together with electrical tape, that the music he carried was not the system's to give or take away. It was already his. It had always been his. He just had to keep playing long enough for the room to finally hear it.